Well, hello and welcome. We're in that time right now where everybody's hunkering down with the stay-at-home order, so I thought that this is a good time to do a little refinishing and reupholstering of our kitchen chairs. Now, these chairs, I built them in 1982, so they're 38 years old, and my wife and I, we raised our two daughters using these chairs. They've been used every single day, 3 meals a day for the last 38 years. And so they're due. I built these of red oak. It was one of my early projects. I tried to have kind of a nice curvy look to them, so there's lots of curves. And these legs, I laminated up pieces of red oak and then band sawed them to shape. And the joints are all mortise and tenon cut. Probably 20 years ago or so, I went ahead and pinned the tenons because the joints were getting a little loose. And another feature of this chair is it's got a stretcher here underneath that goes between the front and the rear, and I made, get that real close there, through mortise and tenons, double through mortise and tenons wedged on both ends to really make the chairs feel solid. The cushion itself is foam. I'll take that apart for you in a while and show you how that's all done. But I wanted to point out that I upholstered the bottom as well because I don't like the look of a chair when you turn it upside down and you see staples and all those kind of things. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take the cushion off, and then using some paint thinner and some acetone and a wire brush, I'm going to try to clean all the grain here on the chair. By the way, these were finished with oil. Probably it was Watco oil that I used back in '82. I can't really remember, but I don't think I was mixing my own back then. So it's probably Watco. And they've been waxed, you know, some since you know, in those 38 years. So there's a lot of grunge to come off here. So after I finish using the paint thinner and acetone to clean out the pores as good as I can, then I'll use sandpaper to you know, take the raised grain down, and then hit it again with some acetone. And once I think it's clean enough, then I'm going to use the 6-part finish, except this time I'll probably use 5 parts. I'll use 2 applications of tung oil, boiled linseed oil, and polyurethane mix, hand rubbed, let that dry for a day, and then I'll do 3 coats of the 2 oils plus beeswax to give it kind of a waxy finish. And then we'll go ahead and do the upholstery, reupholstery of these seats. So let's just get started by taking the cushion off. So I used 2 brass machine screws going up through this bottom stretcher, and that's how I attached the cushion. There's a couple of those T-nuts that are inside the base of the cushion. That's what these screws are going into. All right, so there's the cushion. It's gotten kind of flat over the years. You can see we've had a lot of wear. This is kind of a velvety material, but boy, it's a mess. It's a mess. So that'll all come off. I've got some nice suede type of material. Look at that. It's almost worn all the way through there. So we'll get to that later. So I've just got a brass wire brush, and I'm simply going to work at the pores. But since this is an oil finish on a red oak, the pores are all open, and so over the years they just collected all the dirt. Try to mop up the dirt. Okay, so I'm done with the first brushing of paint thinner. You can see it kind of bleaches out the wood a little bit. Okay, so I've got some acetone, and this stuff dries really fast. So you got to put it on, brush it, and then pretty much wipe it off pretty quickly because it dries. And of course you want to wipe off a liquid that would contain wax and so forth. And I think I'll bring this over the camera. The acetone really cleans well, and that's honest to goodness dirt, because this cloth is practically dry now. That stuff evaporates so quickly. So we're gonna do this enough until we don't have a whole lot of dirt coming off. All right, so now I've got it pretty cleaned up. I'm going to use some 220 grit sandpaper on my block with a little felt wrapped around it to take down the grain, try to get it feeling smooth. And one of the reasons, you clean before you sand is if you don't, your sandpaper just gets filled up with all the junk that's on the wood. So I ought to be able to go through this with just one piece of sandpaper and get it looking pretty nice. And then before I start putting any oil on it, I will wipe it on down with acetone again on a rag to get the dust and pick up any pieces of wax and so forth that still remain. Yeah, I'm ready to put some finish on, and as I said earlier, I'm going to put 2 coats of a mixture of tung oil, boiled linseed oil, and polyurethane varnish, and it's fairly thick. As long as you can keep the air out of this, and I use one of these collapsible jars, you can mix this stuff up and it lasts a long time. Now, this is several years old, I'm sure, and it's just fine. So I put it on by hand, I rub it in real good, and then I wipe it off real good with towels. And then when you're all done with those rags, you got to let those dry, or air dry. Don't clump them up, because this stuff will spontaneously combust. And I may take those out to the barbecue and go ahead and just burn them out there and get that problem solved right away. Now, over the next several days, as I let the oil cure, I do 1 coat a day. I can work on the upholstery. So the first thing I want to do is take apart the old upholstery. Now, when I had made this, 38 years ago, I had cut a piece of material and sewed it by hand all around the edge. And you can see where this used to fit onto the chair. You can see where the rabbet of the chair frame had made an indentation. So I'm just going to cut that off, and then I can use this material as a pattern. I'm just going to use a utility knife and cut some threads. I'm not too worried about damaging the material, obviously. Okay, so you can see this is that bottom piece. And that was what I was trying to hide by using the bottom piece. I stapled the upholstery onto a base I had made. So the next step here is to go ahead and get these staples out. And I'll just use a screwdriver and a pair of diagonal cutters here to work out these staples. All right, so that's all the staples that are out of there. Now I have the cushion part here, and I think maybe when I made this I used inch or an inch and a half thick. It's pretty beat down by now, but I'm going to replace it with 2-inch. So let me go ahead and just try to remove this. Pretty worn out. I'm going to scrape off all the old. That gets most of it. I just want to have a good bonding surface for the new foam. I wanted to show you this piece though in some detail. First of all, I wanted to show you where I'd screwed in the hold down bolts. I used these T-nuts that I had installed from the inside. And also, I made this out of 2 pieces of 1/4-inch MDF, and I had used a form to glue these together so that I could maintain this shape. So when you sit on this, you're kind of cradled. It's like a little bucket seat. And that really proved to be beneficial. On the chair itself, I'll show you that for a moment. I also had that bucket shape on there, and you can see how the rabbet here would completely conceal that 1/2 inch of MDF, and then the cushion would rise up above this edge here. I found that to be fairly comfortable. Also, when I made this chair, I made this back stretcher curve out to the back like this, you can see, so that you can sit back in there, and that also made it comfortable. Okay, so the next step will be to glue on foam using some spray glue, and then do the upholstery. So I ordered this 2-inch thick high density foam pads online, and they're 24-inch square, so they're bigger than what I need. So I'll be cutting off some excess. What I'll do is take the form here and lay it on here, and I'll just cut off a lot of the excess early. All right, that looks good. All right, so now what I'll do is I'll spread some glue on both these surfaces. And so I'm using 3M Super 77 spray adhesive. It's a pretty fast grab. You can basically spray it on both surfaces, let it dry for at least 10 seconds and up to I think it's 20 minutes. Basically, I spray it on, and by the time I'm ready to put it together, I've made the time limit. They say to touch it with your knuckle, and if it doesn't come off on your knuckle, it's dry enough, and that's exactly what I've got here. Okay, now I got to aim this carefully so I don't miss where it has to go. All right, looks like I've got it covered evenly. Well, yesterday I put the second coat of the oil and varnish mix on, and now I'm going to do 3 coats over 3 days of a oil and beeswax finish. This is equal parts of boiled linseed oil and tung oil, and then I just heat it just a little bit over a double boiler, you know, in other words, put a coffee can of the mixture in some water and put that in an electric skillet and heat it up a little bit, just get it warm, and then sprinkle in a small handful of beeswax shredded, not too much, and that'll eventually melt, and then you let it cool, and if you did it right, you end up with something that has a consistency of, you know, heavy oil. So again, just rub this stuff in, and we'll do 2 or 3 coats of this, and that'll be it. And of course, when after I'm done rubbing it on, I wipe it all down, just like we did with the varnish mix. Wipe it all down with paper towels. You can let this sit a little while longer because it doesn't have that varnish trying to dry, so it's not as big of a rush to try to get this stuff off, because it just doesn't set up tacky. Well, the glue is dry on the backing, so I'm going to use a utility knife blade to trim off the excess. And then cut these little corners out. All right, so that's roughly the shape. And then I'm just going to bevel the edges so that the fabric will flow more smoothly across there. I want to use scissors for that. I think that'll be a little easier. There we go. It's rough, but it's going to get covered and pulled in nice, and that'll work just fine. Well, the fabric that I have for this piece is a kind of a suede fabric, and it comes on a big roll, 58 inches wide. I needed a couple of squares that were pretty much 26-inch squares, so I'm just going to cut a width in half and then cut 26 inches, and I've already marked where I'm going to cut. And I also drew an arrow on the back side in the same direction as this rolls, simply because, you know, sometimes the material has a little nap that needs to be in a certain way. So I figure I'll just make all 4 chairs where that arrow points to the front of the chair, and I should be good, even if there's any problem like that. So I'm just going to use scissors and cut out 2 of these squares for 2 chairs. There we go. Now I'm going to attach the upholstery fabric to the backing with a pneumatic stapler. I'm using 1/2-inch staples in this staple gun, and I've got the pressure set down to 60 pounds, which is kind of low, but it'll prevent the staple from going all the way through the fabric, I've discovered. When I did this originally in 1982, I just used, it might have been a hand stapler, and that worked just fine too. But I've got this, and drives a good staple. So I'm going to do the corners first. Put in about 5 staples let's take a quick look. Okay, looks like it's doing fine. All right, and then I'll start at the front and staple this in place. And then I'll go to the back and do the same thing. And let's do a check. Okay, looking pretty good. Notice I'm not going right up to the corners because I'm going to have to do a little tucking and folding there to get all this material so it's not in the way, so it doesn't bunch up. Right now I'm just trying to get this generally where it needs to be. Okay, so that's generally the way I want it. Now I've got to pay attention to the corners. And what I'm basically going to do is get rid of a lot of excess material here. Okay, and I want to fold the corner material in under the side material. Like that. Okay, and then when this fits onto the chair rail, the chair legs come on up and fill in this area. Okay, so that's basically how it's done, and then later on, when I put the back or the bottom material, it'll sew right up to this edge. So I'll just cut off all this extra before I do that. All right, so that's on there pretty good. Now let's trim this up a little bit so we don't have so much excess material to look bunchy underneath. There we go. Doesn't look very nice, but when we put the bottom on and sew that around, it'll look just fine. So I've got the bottom material turned upside down, and I'm going to take the piece I saved when I took the cushion apart and make sure I'm got my arrow in the right direction. I'm going to go ahead and trace this on the bottom. Now I've got the material inside out so I can draw on it, and you won't see the drawing lines on the finished product. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to do a couple of things. On the corners, I'm just going to go ahead and cut from point to point, because when you fold this thing in, you really don't want to have any material right there on the corner, or you won't be able to fold it around that curve. So I'll get rid of all that excess. All right, now I've got my iron heated up so it is making steam, but not so hot as to melt the material. And I'm going to start with the front and fold over on the line that I just drew and try to put a crease in this, and that's going to make it a whole lot easier when I start doing the hand sewing of this thing. All right, now last thing is I'm going to trim off the excess. I'm going to leave about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch of material folded under. Again, just eliminate bulk on the bottom of the cushion. And then I'll just finish this up by just putting a little crease in the center of each of these corner curves, just to give me a little help when it comes time to fold this thing under and actually sew it. Okay, turn the iron off. Now this is ready to be sewn on. Okay, this is the difficult part now. It's going to take a long time to do, and that is sewing this bottom onto the bottom of the cushion by hand. And what I do is I've got some thread here. It's approximately the same color as the material. I've got a needle and a little leather kind of a thimble pad that fits on my finger so I can push the needle through the material. And I've already threaded this needle. It's going to take about 4 or 5 of these to make it all the way around. So I'll just start at one corner, try to make sure that my material is really centered well, because I'm just sewing to the very edge of the material. And like I say, this is difficult because this material is so dense that you can hardly get the needle through it. I mean, it really takes a lot of effort. See how hard it is for me just to pull the needle back through. Okay, and then I'll just find the loop on the end of this and put my needle through so that I hate it when the knot just goes zinging through the hole I just made. Okay, and there's my first stitch. My first of several hundred that I'm going to have to make around this. So it's going to take a good half a day to do this. This is not efficient money-making operation here. This is the kind of thing you do for the love of doing it. And I think I'll sit down in a chair and continue on. So sewing on the bottom is done, and by feel I located the position of the 2 T-nuts and put a little black dot on there. And the next step is to take my awl and just poke through the material so that I can put screws through there. Now I've got the 2 original screws, and what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and make sure that they actually go in and screw into the holes before I try to put this on the chair. Okay, and then we'll take the chair frame, set the cushion into it. And go ahead and put the screws in. And that's that. Chair's all done. Ready to take in the house and use. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been about time that I refinished these and reupholstered them, and you got to watch it. Thanks for watching.